Hey everyone, welcome back to Novelists Unwind. This is Johnnie Alexander. Really glad to be with you all today. Thank you for watching our video and our interview with my special guest, Carrie Turansky, an award-winning author. She's got several books that she's written, and we're going to talk about her latest, No Ocean Too Wide. Wonderful story. I'm in the middle of it and just want to spend the rest of the day reading the rest of it. It's so good. Carrie, tell us, I want to hear about your writing journey and how you got started, but let's start off with talking about this particular story. So you specialize in historicals. What got you interested in this topic? And I'll let you share what the book's about.
Okay, I love the Edwardian period, which is early 1900s in England. So I'm always looking for ideas and things that happened in history during that time period. So one day I was just scrolling through Facebook and I saw a post that had 3 little children that looked like poor children. And the person was asking for information about their relatives. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I followed the post. And it was in a group called the British Home Children's Advocacy and Research Association group on Facebook. And so I thought, well, this is interesting. So I scrolled down and there were several posts, and it was all from descendants of people who had, their relatives had come from England to Canada in the late 1800s or early 1900s. As unescorted children, just as groups of kids that would come over from children's homes. And so I thought, wow, I need to learn more about this. So I did some research, went to their website, and then got some books and things that were about that topic. And I found out that more than 100,000 British children who were poor, abandoned, orphan children were first taken into children's homes there, which actually were started by Christians who were trying to help with this problem in their society. But there were just so many children that it was just really difficult for them to take care of them all. And so one woman went to a lecture from the people who started the orphan train movement in the United States, where they were taking poor children from New York City and then sending them out west or to the Midwest on trains to be taken in by families. So she thought, well, maybe we could send the British children to Canada, since that was their connection here in North America. So they started doing that, and in about 1869, and that is how the British home child movement kind of started, and it went clear until almost right before World War II.
Wow.
Kids were still sent then, but mostly it stopped by that time. So there are still some British home children alive who are like in their 90s or something, and I've heard interviews of them and what it was like, and there was a huge prejudice against them because at that time they believed that if your parents were poor, it was like sinful, and you had bad blood or whatever, and you were going to pollute the Canadian population. So if you've ever read Anne of Green Gables or seen the movie, she was a Canadian-born home child, and there was a prejudice against her. But it was even much stronger against the British home children because most came from poverty. But not always. Sometimes it could be like one parent died or both parents died, or there was some kind of tragedy like that, and then the children would go into a home, and then too many children, and they would send another group to Canada. But unfortunately, they did not go to be adopted like some of the orphan trained children did. Most went officially as indentured workers.
Wow.
So even young children, the boys went to work on farms, and the girls went as what they called domestics or household servants. Even from a young age, they were expected to work. And the families were supposed to provide schooling for them and clothing and that kind of thing, but a lot of times they didn't. And unfortunately, a lot of the kids were not well cared for, and there's a lot of tragic stories. So for my research for the book, I decided this is such an interesting thing. I wanted to write about it. So I had to create a fictional family and take the different research that I had found about how kids got into this kind of situation, and then pretend that was a family and then write about it. So my book has a family where the mother is widowed and she becomes ill, and her 3 youngest children go into a children's home. And the oldest daughter is already out working as a lady's maid at a wealthy estate. And when she learns that the mother is ill, she comes back to London and is searching for her siblings, but they've already been sent to Canada. So she has to then make a choice of what she's going to do and how she's going to take care of that problem. So she wants to reunite her family. So that takes up the rest of the book of her following them to Canada and then working to reunite them. So that's kind of a little bit of a picture of what it's about.
And it's just so compelling. And I mean, you can tell the research that's gone into it as I'm reading this. And it's just so interesting how you've taken this situation then where these people, I mean, they try to explain, no, our mother's in the hospital, and the adults won't even listen. And so these children are sent away, even though they do have a parent, which just...
Yes, and it was true that the sending homes, the children's homes could send the children without the parents' permission even. Once they were sent into the home had the legal rights over them, and all they had to do was to send what's called a sailing notice to say that your children have been sent and they've already left the country. Wow. So that's what happened to the family in my story. So.
And then your hero, he's an attorney or a solicitor, an attorney, and he's looking into reform. So I'm assuming that, because you mentioned some different people's names and all. Were those actual people that were involved in, like, I forget what his name is, start with a B, that would do the lectures, and then he had started orphanages.
Dr. Bernardo is probably who you're mentioning. Yeah, he was the most famous of all those who were over children's homes and sent the most children to Canada. And he was a Christian, and he really believed this was giving the kids a fresh start. But I think even in his life, it just became such a huge, overwhelming thing, and there was so much responsibility on him. He made a commitment that he even had written above some of the doors of his children's home. No child ever turned away. We always have an open door. But then you had to have a back door to send them off, because you couldn't just keep taking in every child and providing for them. It would just be impossible. So he did send the most children over to Canada.
So you do present like both of these sides to it. It's like when you see these characters struggling with the right and wrong of this, and what are we going to do with these children if we don't send them to Canada? It's like, well, then what do we, there's just, and are these homes doing the best thing, or are they not doing the best thing? And there are no, and I mean, right now we don't have an easy answer to that. Where I'm at in the story, I don't know whether you come up with an easy answer by the end. I doubt it, because that's such a complicated situation. But no,
it is, and I did feel that was important to present both sides, because I know it was Christians who started out with very good intentions, but I think just the hugeness of it and the fact that the children were so far away, they weren't able to follow up, and they weren't able to really screen the people who were taking the children. That was another issue. Anybody could pay $2, fill out a form. I think they did have to have, like, say they belonged to a church or something like that, some kind of moral reference, but anybody who wanted to could just take these kids. And then some of the groups, there were different groups who sent the children. Some were better at following up than others. Some actually believed that follow-up would be like an insult to those who took the children, and so they did not do any follow-up, no checking on the kids at all. But my hero in the story, I modeled after a lawyer who actually was sent by England over to Canada to look into it, because actually I think the Queen of England was one who was questioning if this was the best thing and the right thing to do. Wow. So the man who wrote the report, his name was Andrew Doyle, and he, in the 1870s, I think, but everything he suggested, at first there was a little tiny bit of work to reform a little bit, but then it just continued to explode, and there really wasn't the changes made that he had recommended that would have been better for the kids.
Wow. Well, yeah, it is just fascinating. And it's fascinating to me that you come up with this wonderful story from being on Facebook.
Yeah. And I have had fun connecting with that group of people. They are wonderful. In fact, the lady who is the CEO of the research organization for this whole group, I asked her to be an early reader, and she gave me a really nice endorsement, and she said a lot of people try to write about this, but not everybody does their research. So she appreciated that I did the research and tried to present it. So she's like promoting it in Canada for me. So that's
Oh,
really nice. I really appreciate that. She gave me a nice endorsement to put on my website, that kind of thing. So
oh, that is really great. And you're right.
yeah,
The research is so important when you're writing a story like this and really digging into it and getting
yeah,
the nuances of
yeah. Because even though it's fiction, you want to be faithful to the facts.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's talk about your other book too. Now, Across the Blue, when did it come out? Is it?
Yeah, Across the Blue came out in February 2018, so last year.
Okay.
And this one was inspired by, I went to the Smithsonian Space and Air Museum with my grandkids, and I went into a room about early aviation about the Wright brothers.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, oh, that was so interesting. And then I looked, and there was a poster for the first international air meet held in France in 1909. And I thought, oh, that's my era that I really like. So I thought, when I went home, I researched the first international air meet. And that led me to the race to be the first to fly across the English Channel. So I decided that would be the goal for my hero, that he would be one of those early aviators who saw the Wright brothers when they came to France to demonstrate their plane. And from that time, within a year, aviation took off because they learned so much from the Wright brothers. So I thought, well, that'd be fun if I had him be wanting to be the first to fly across. And then for my heroine, I had her be a young wealthy woman whose father was a newspaper owner who was offering the prize for the first pilot to fly across. So I thought that could be a good connection. And her goal is to really become a journalist, which was very difficult for young women at the time, especially a wealthy young woman. That would be the normal path, even if your father was the owner of the newspaper. So that was fun. So I set the story in Kent, England, where the White Cliffs of Dover are, because that's the closest point to France, and that's where the actual race to be the first to fly across the channel happened. But I couldn't have my hero. Well, I don't want to spoil the story, but there's a real person who did that. So I had to figure out, how am I going to work around that, and how can that fit into the story? So that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed learning about early aviation and how that all developed and how that impacted people and changed the world a lot for everybody.
Show us the cover again. Now, this is the large print edition of the book. So if you get the paperback, it'll be different. I mean, that is so intriguing to me that this man has this bandage over his eye. It's like, oh, wow. It's like, what's this all about? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
So you've gotten to go to England and do research there too, right? You've traveled.
Yeah, I've gone on 2 research trips to England. The first one I went with my husband, and we rented a car, and he drove on the wrong side of the road for about 400 miles from the wrong side of the car, and he had an accident. He was very kind, and we went to all kinds of historical homes and gardens and that kind of thing. And then the second trip, I went with my writer friend, Kathy Golke, who writes in Dale, and she and I took a week and visited some of the sites where our books are set. I visited Tintisfield, which is what I had in mind when I wrote the Highland Hall series, and got to tour that beautiful estate. And then we went up to the Lake District where Kathy set her previous book, Until We Find Home, I think it is. Yeah, Until We Find Home. So we had a lot of fun. And then we joined Liz Curtis Higgs and did another week or so in Scotland. So that was a whirlwind tour. It was
a great trip.
Yeah, I met some really wonderful ladies, 40 ladies in a bus going all over Scotland and going all these crazy places. So we went to Inverary Castle, where they filmed part of Downton Abbey when the family goes to Scotland. That was really fun. And then we went to the Isle of Skye and the Isle of Mull, and Liz just loves Scotland. So she just showed us all around, and we just saw a lot of wonderful things. And we went at the end of May and beginning of June. So it was a perfect time, and so many flowers were blooming. The bluebells were all over the fields, and wild bluebells and beautiful azaleas and rhododendrons. So the gardens were really pretty, and we had a very memorable time.
I bet you did. And I saw on your website that you've also been to Highclere Castle, which is where Downton Abbey.
Yeah,
my husband Downton Abbey.
Oh, I just loved it. We went there. Yeah, Scott and I went there on the first trip, and it's even more amazing than when you watch it on TV. We went when Downton Abbey was just starting to be popular. So we were there on a day when it was not crowded at all. And they had these volunteer tour guides in every room, and you can ask them a question, and you go through the library, and
Wow.
you go through the music room and the sitting room, and some of the rooms they don't even use on the show. And then you go up that beautiful staircase and look into the different bedrooms. And then downstairs, they don't have the kitchen and the servant scenes like we see in the movie, in the show. That's all filmed in London. They've turned that into like a tea room, and there's also an exhibit of ancient Egyptian artifacts, because one of the earls of Carnarvon was there when they discovered King Tut's tomb, and so there's a lot of history about Egypt and people. I thought that might be a fun thing to write about too. But anyway, that was a really fun visit there. If you ever can get to, it's only a day trip from London, so if you're in London, if you're planning to go there, they aren't open a lot now because they do so much filming and they do weddings and private events and stuff. But if you can hit it on a time when you can get a ticket to get in, the house and the gardens are just really, really lovely.
It's on my bucket list. It truly is. My daughter and I want to go. And just one of these days, we are going to work it out so we can do that. And the movie, of course, is coming out in August, I think, right? Or
yeah, it was September, I think I saw.
Is that when it is?
20th, yeah.
Yeah, wow. So that's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
Well, how many books? I know you've won lots of awards for your books. How many books have you written so far?
I've had 20 novels and novellas published, and then I wrote 5 books before one was published. So had to learn how to write. Those are my learning how to write books.
I think we all have some.
Yeah, in the drawer. Stay in the drawer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, really cool. So how did you begin? What was your, did you always want to be a writer, or how did that all
I've always loved to read, and I've always loved history and traveling. I homeschooled my kids, and we did a lot of reading aloud of historical fiction, so that really stirred up some ideas for me of things I would like to write about. But I didn't really start writing until, midlife, and our family spent a year in Kenya, East Africa. My husband was teaching at a Bible college, and I just had a lot of time for my imagination there with very little electricity going off all the time. So when I came home, I wrote my first book, kind of reliving my experiences in Africa.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't really know much about what I was doing. I just sort of like poured out a story. I didn't know fiction techniques because I'd gone to college and written papers and that kind of thing. But, there's a whole set of fiction techniques that are totally different. So I needed to learn that, and I found that out by going to a writer's conference where everybody submits their first chapter to an agent. And I happened to get a very top-level agent, and I don't know if she was in a bad mood or going through a difficult time, but she took a red pen and just wrote a line down the side of all the pages, and she said, "I can't even critique this. You need to go learn how to write."
Oh my God.
For the time, I was very shocked, and I had to finish my 15-minute appointment, and there wasn't much to say. So I went back to my room, cried for a few minutes, and then I thought about it and prayed about it. And over the next couple of weeks, the Lord did a couple of things just to encourage me that what she said was true. I needed to learn it. I could learn it. I could learn how to write. So I joined a group at my local library. The first time I said I'm a writer and read my writing aloud. And then I wrote to Elizabeth White, who's a really wonderful fiction author. And I asked her for advice, and she was very kind and wrote back. And she said, well, there's a new group starting, American Fiction Romance Writers. Why don't you join that? And I think that would be good for you. In that sense, become American Christian Fiction Writer. So I joined the very first year that they started and got involved in a critique group right away and went to the first conference and have been going ever since. And through that group, I met my agent and met my, other partners and critique partners and other writing friends. So that's been a really wonderful connection for me. And I'm really grateful for ACFW.
I interviewed Beth just a couple days ago, like last week. So yeah.
We stay connected and we room together sometimes at conferences. It's really fun to see her. I sure appreciate her. She was so kind to, help me at the beginning.
Yeah, she was a lot of fun to talk with. So her for those of you watching, Beth also has an interview, so you can look for her link too and watch her interview as well. That's great. So cool. That is so cool. What a great story. And it's, for people who are wanting to write, aspiring writers, I mean, these are the kinds of stories I hear a lot. It's like it took writing several books. It took years. I'm really sorry about the whole red pen thing, but look at you now. I mean, you're writing this wonderful, in-depth, deep historical novel. I mean, this is not just the surface beach read kind of book. This is, this is really got some meaningful themes in it and all that kind of thing. So, wow.
Right. Well, I think it just means that if you want to learn it, I mean, it may take time, but there are techniques you can learn. If you're a creative person, you have a storyteller imagination, you work at it. Just like you go to college or graduate school, it takes a few years and you invest in it, and you keep using your gift and see what happens.
Right, that's right. So, well, congratulations. And again, I highly recommend this. I'm probably going to spend most of the afternoon reading it. So we're finishing it, No Ocean Too Wide, and then also Across the Blue. We're pushing both those books today. Thank you so much, Carrie, for being with me. I've got one last question I ask everybody. When you are done and you've typed the end, what do you do to unwind?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I love to go outside and walk. I live in New Jersey, which sounds like, and it's in the suburbs. We have a beautiful lake right across the street from where I live. Nice. It's a small man-made lake, but it's like a mile around. So I love to go for a walk out there and see the birds and the fish. I mean, we have an eagle that lives there sometimes, and blue heron, and people have put their koi fish in the lake, and so the koi jump sometimes. And I enjoy going out for a walk. I mean, I try to do that while I'm writing too. But when I'm done, maybe we watch Downton Abbey like four shows in a row or something, or just maybe sleep in a little more.
Yeah. Well, that's what I did this weekend.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Binge watching, though, is a popular answer. It's like authors, they write, and then they just want to veg and just binge watch something so that their mind doesn't have to be thinking about story.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. Well, thank you so much for being with me. I really appreciate it. It's great having you. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnnie.
And thanks to everyone who's watching. We're thankful you're here. And, stop by again for another episode of Novelists Unwind. Bye-bye.